How are you going to do that? I'm still figuring that out. But the gala next month might be a good place to start. ##### the enemy's success. Over the following weeks, Marcus researched David and Elena's empire obsessively. What he found both infuriated and impressed him. They had taken his small firm and built it into a regional powerhouse. Reed and Associates now employed over 200 people and had offices in Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco. But the success was built on lies and theft. Marcus discovered a pattern of acquiring struggling firms, stripping their assets, and pushing out the original owners. The methods were sophisticated, involving complex financial maneuvers that most people couldn't track. But Marcus had learned from Victor and his prison teachers. He could see the patterns. David had become a celebrity in Portland's business community, featured in magazines and speaking at conferences. Elena had transformed herself into a philanthropist, serving on charity boards and hosting fundraising events. They were living the life Marcus had dreamed of, funded by the money they had stolen. The waterfront development that Marcus had designed was now complete, a stunning collection of towers and public spaces that had won architectural awards. But David's name was on the project, not Marcus's. The building that should have been his legacy was credited to the man who had destroyed him. Every discovery added fuel to Marcus's determination. But he kept his emotions controlled, channeled into careful planning. Victor's lessons echoed in his mind. Patience, precision, and knowing your enemy. ##### an unexpected ally. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus was at a coffee shop in Portland, reviewing his notes on David's business acquisitions, when a woman sat down at his table uninvited. "They won't," Marcus interrupted. "I've changed too much. And people see what they expect to see. They think Marcus Reed is a broken ex-con living in poverty somewhere. They're not looking for Michael Ross, successful security consultant from Seattle." Sarah studied him with worried eyes. "You've changed, Marcus. It's not just the appearance. You're harder now. Colder. Prison does that to people." "I know. But I don't want you to lose yourself completely in this revenge plan. Mom and Dad wouldn't have wanted." "Mom and Dad are dead," Marcus said quietly. Their parents had died in a car accident 2 years before his arrest, spared the pain of seeing their son's public humiliation. "And right now revenge is all I have." "That's not true. You have me. You have your talent. You could start over. Rebuild your career under a new name. And let them win? Let them keep living off the money they stole? Let them keep my company, my reputation, my life." Marcus shook his head. "No. They need to pay for what they did. Not just to me, but to everyone they've hurt since." Sarah sighed and pulled out a folder. "Then you should see this. I've been investigating their business practices. David and Elena aren't just running Reed and Associates anymore. They've acquired 3 other architecture firms in the past 2 years. And there are rumors of financial irregularities at all of them." Marcus opened the folder, scanning through articles and financial reports. "They're doing it again. The same scheme they used on me. It looks that way. But proving it is another matter. They've gotten better at covering their tracks." "Then I'll need to get inside," Marcus said, his mind already working through the possibilities. "I need access to their systems, their files, their communications." A new identity. 6 months after his release, Marcus stood in a small apartment in Seattle, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The man looking back was almost unrecognizable from the architect who had walked into prison 3 years ago. His once soft body was now lean and muscular. His brown hair was darker, styled differently. He wore contact lenses that changed his eye color from blue to brown. A carefully groomed beard covered his jaw. But the biggest changes were invisible. The way he carried himself, the way he observed everything around him with careful attention, the way he had learned to hide his thoughts behind a neutral expression. Prison had taught him how to become someone else, and freedom had given him the opportunity to practice. He had been living under the name Michael Ross, working as a security consultant for small businesses. The job was perfect for his purposes. It gave him access to information systems, taught him about corporate security weaknesses, and allowed him to move in business circles without attracting attention. More importantly, it gave him the skills he needed to get close to David and Elena. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. They're hosting a charity gala next month. Big event. Everyone who matters will be there. Marcus smiled grimly. Perfect. ### sisters support. Later that evening, Sarah arrived at his apartment with takeout and information. His younger sister had been his lifeline during the dark years, and now she was his partner in planning. She worked as a journalist for a Portland business magazine, which gave her access to information about David and Elena's activities. I still think this is dangerous, Sarah said, unpacking containers of Thai food on his small kitchen table. If they recognize you. He had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. 3 years learning, planning, and transforming himself from a trusting fool into someone who could fight back. David and Elena thought they had destroyed him. They thought the broken man they had sent to prison would never recover, never challenge them again. They were wrong. As Sarah drove them toward Portland, Marcus stared out the window at the familiar landscape, seeing it with new eyes. He was no longer the naive architect who had believed the best of people. He was something else now, something forged in the fires of betrayal and imprisonment. He was a man with a mission. A man with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The game was about to begin, and this time Marcus would be the one making the rules. Some of them stay broken. They get out in their shells of what they used to be. Others, they use their time here to transform themselves. They learn, they grow stronger, they plan. Plan for what? For whatever comes next. For justice. For revenge. For redemption. Victor smiled slightly. Sometimes those things are the same. Over the following months, Victor became Marcus's mentor. He taught him patience and planning. He introduced him to other inmates who could teach useful skills. A former investigator who explained how to trace financial crimes. A computer expert who was inside for hacking, who taught Marcus about digital forensics and security systems. A lawyer who had been disbarred, who explained the intricacies of evidence and legal strategy. Marcus absorbed everything like a sponge. He spent his days working in the prison library, with access to legal databases and news articles. He tracked David and Elena from behind bars, watching as they announced their engagement, then their marriage. He watched as they took Reed and Associates public, making millions. He watched as they were featured in business magazines, celebrated as young entrepreneurs who had built a successful firm. Every article, every photograph, every success they celebrated fueled the fire that Victor had helped him kindle. But it was a controlled burn now, not a wildfire. Marcus was learning to think like a chess player, planning moves several steps ahead. ### physical transformation. Prison changed Marcus in other ways too. The angry, confused man who had arrived transformed into something harder and more focused. He spent hours in the prison gym building muscle and discipline. He learned to fight from men who had grown up on violent streets. He learned to be invisible when necessary and intimidating when required. Some of them stay broken. They get out in their shells of what they used to be. Others, they use their time here to transform themselves. They learn, they grow stronger, they plan. Plan for what? For whatever comes next. For justice. For revenge. For redemption. Victor smiled slightly. Sometimes those things are the same. Over the following months, Victor became Marcus's mentor. He taught him patience and planning. He introduced him to other inmates who could teach useful skills. A former investigator who explained how to trace financial crimes. A computer expert who was inside for hacking, who taught Marcus about digital forensics and security systems. A lawyer who had been disbarred, who explained the intricacies of evidence and legal strategy. Marcus absorbed everything like a sponge. He spent his days working in the prison library, with access to legal databases and news articles. He tracked David and Elena from behind bars, watching as they announced their engagement, then their marriage. He watched as they took Reed and Associates public, making millions. He watched as they were featured in business magazines, celebrated as young entrepreneurs who had built a successful firm. Every article, every photograph, every success they celebrated fueled the fire that Victor had helped him kindle. But it was a controlled burn now, not a wildfire. Marcus was learning to think like a chess player, planning moves several steps ahead. ### physical transformation. Prison changed Marcus in other ways too. The angry, confused man who had arrived transformed into something harder and more focused. He spent hours in the prison gym building muscle and discipline. He learned to fight from men who had grown up on violent streets. He learned to be invisible when necessary and intimidating when required. Some of them stay broken. They get out and they're shells of what they used to be. Others, they use their time here to transform themselves. They learn, they grow stronger, they plan. Plan for what? For whatever comes next. For justice. For revenge. For redemption. Victor smiled slightly. Sometimes those things are the same. Over the following months, Victor became Marcus's mentor. He taught him patience and planning. He introduced him to other inmates who could teach useful skills. A former investigator who explained how to trace financial crimes. A computer expert who was inside for hacking, who taught Marcus about digital forensics and security systems. A lawyer who had been disbarred, who explained the intricacies of evidence and legal strategy. Marcus absorbed everything like a sponge. He spent his days working in the prison library, with access to legal databases and news articles. He tracked David and Elena from behind bars, watching as they announced their engagement, then their marriage. He watched as they took Reed and Associates public, making millions. He watched as they were featured in business magazines, celebrated as young entrepreneurs who had built a successful firm. Every article, every photograph, every success they celebrated fueled the fire that Victor had helped him kindle. But it was a controlled burn now, not a wildfire. Marcus was learning to think like a chess player, planning moves several steps ahead. #### physical transformation. Prison changed Marcus in other ways too. The angry, confused man who had arrived transformed into something harder and more focused. He spent hours in the prison gym building muscle and discipline. He learned to fight from men who had grown up on violent streets. He learned to be invisible when necessary and intimidating when required. As the bailiffs led him away, he caught one last glimpse of Elena and David in the gallery. They sat together, their hands intertwined, trying to look somber. But Marcus saw the triumph in their eyes. They had won. They had his company, his reputation, his money, and his freedom. But as the courtroom doors closed behind him, Marcus made himself a promise. This wasn't over. Not by a long way. #### prison lessons. Clarkson Federal Correctional Facility was located 3 hours outside Portland, surrounded by forests and mountains that looked beautiful from a distance, but might as well have been on another planet. The prison was a world unto itself, with its own rules, its own hierarchy, its own brutal logic. Marcus arrived on a gray November morning, processed through the system like a piece of meat. They took his clothes, his identity, everything that had made him Marcus Reed, successful architect. They gave him a number, a uniform, and a cell with a man named Victor Santos. Victor was in his 60s, with silver hair and dark eyes that seemed to see right through people. He was serving the last year of a 20-year sentence for financial crimes, though he never talked about the specifics. What he did talk about, in the long nights when sleep wouldn't come, was survival and strategy. "You're angry," Victor observed one evening, a few weeks after Marcus arrived. They were in their cell during lockdown, Marcus lying on his bunk and staring at the concrete ceiling. "Wouldn't you be?" Marcus replied bitterly. "Of course. Anger is natural. But the question is, what will you do with it? Will you let it eat you alive from the inside? Or will you use it as fuel?" Marcus turned to look at the older man. "What do you mean?" "I've seen men come in here broken by injustice," Victor said. Marcus stared at him. "That's insane. I don't gamble." "But you do," Elena said softly. "We have credit card statements showing regular trips to the casino. We have testimony from dealers who will swear they've seen you there. We have emails from your account discussing debt problems. Those are fake. All of it." David smiled, and Marcus saw a stranger looking back at him. "Prove it. Your career, your reputation, everything you've built, it all rests on your word against ours. And Marcus, there are two of us. Who do you think people will believe?" The fall. Marcus didn't call the police that night. Instead, he went to a lawyer, then to Margaret, trying to build a defense. But David and Elena had been thorough in their planning. Within a week, an anonymous tip brought federal investigators to the firm's offices. Within a month, Marcus was arrested for embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. The trial was a nightmare. David and Elena testified against him, playing the roles of devastated business partner and heartbroken girlfriend who had discovered his crimes. The fabricated evidence was convincing. The prosecutors painted a picture of a man consumed by gambling debts, stealing from his own company to fund his addiction. Marcus's lawyer fought hard, but without solid proof of the frame-up, it was his word against manufactured evidence. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning a guilty verdict. Standing in the courtroom, hearing the judge sentence him to 5 years in federal prison, Marcus felt something break inside him. Not his spirit exactly, but his faith in the world he had known. He had believed in hard work, honesty, and justice. He had trusted the people closest to him. All of it had been an illusion. A sound from the bedroom made him freeze. Voices low and intimate. Marcus moved toward the closed door, each step feeling like walking through deep water. He reached for the handle, then stopped. Did he really want to see what was on the other side? Did he want confirmation of the betrayal his mind was already accepting? He opened the door. Elena was in bed with David. They sprang apart, shock and guilt written across their faces. For a long moment no one spoke. Marcus stood in the doorway, the engagement ring still in his pocket, feeling like a stranger in a nightmare. "Marcus," Elena said finally, pulling the sheet around herself. "This isn't what you think." "Really?" His voice came out flat, emotionless. "Because it looks like my fiancé is sleeping with my best friend. And based on what I found on your computer, you've both been stealing from my company." David recovered faster, his face hardening. "You weren't supposed to find out this way, Mark. We were going to tell you." "Tell me what?" "That you've been robbing me blind while pretending to be my friend? That the woman I love has been betraying me the entire time." Marcus felt anger rising, hot and bitter in his throat. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but there was something calculating behind them. "You're always working, Marcus. You care more about your buildings and your career than about people. David and we connected over how alone we both felt. So you decided to steal $3 million as compensation?" Marcus pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," David said calmly. He reached for his own phone on the nightstand. "You see, we've been very careful. Every transfer, every transaction, it all leads back to you. Your digital signature, your access codes, your authorization. We have documentation showing that you've been skimming money from the company to fund a gambling addiction." The money had been siphoned off gradually, small enough amounts that no one would notice immediately, but adding up to a fortune over time. The trail led him to the server logs, showing when the transfers had been authorized. His heart sank as he saw the pattern. Many of the transfers had been made from David's computer, using Marcus's stolen credentials. But there were also transfers made from another location, an IP address that took him several minutes to trace. The address was residential. It was Elena's apartment. Marcus sat back in his chair, feeling as though the floor had dropped out from beneath him. It couldn't be true. Not Elena. Not David. Not both of them together. There had to be another explanation. But even as he tried to rationalize it, pieces began to fall into place. The times Elena had asked detailed questions about his passwords and security protocols, claiming she wanted to understand his work better. The weekends when David had volunteered to work alone at the office, saying he wanted to catch up on paperwork. The strange looks they had exchanged at the last company party, glances Marcus had dismissed as meaningless. He needed proof. Real proof, not just circumstantial evidence and IP addresses. ####the trap springs. Marcus left the office at midnight, driving through empty streets to Elena's apartment in the Pearl District. He still had a key, a symbol of the trust between them. His hand shook as he unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and quiet. Too quiet. Marcus moved through the familiar space, his heart pounding. Elena's laptop sat on the dining table, still open and glowing softly. He approached it carefully, seeing financial spreadsheets displayed on the screen. His company's accounts, with annotations in Elena's handwriting marking the transfers. "I've been reviewing the accounts for the quarterly report, and I found some irregularities." Marcus leaned forward, studying the spreadsheet she displayed. Numbers swam before his eyes, but certain patterns began to emerge. large transfers to offshore accounts, invoices for materials that had never been delivered, payments to contractors who didn't exist. How much? Marcus asked, his voice hollow. Nearly $3 million over the past 18 months, Margaret replied. The transfers are authorized with your digital signature, Marcus. Every single one of them. His blood ran cold. That's impossible. I never authorized these transfers. Someone has been using my credentials. Margaret's expression was sympathetic but worried. I believe you, Marcus. But on paper this looks like embezzlement. We need to investigate this immediately and probably contact the authorities. Wait, Marcus said, his mind racing. Let me look into this first. Give me 24 hours before we do anything official. If someone is stealing from the company, I need to find out who and how they're doing it. Margaret hesitated, then nodded. 24 hours. But Marcus, please be careful. Whoever did this was very sophisticated. They covered their tracks well. Hashtag the shattering truth. Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon diving into the company's financial records. His engagement dinner with Elena forgotten. He called her to cancel, saying only that something urgent had come up at work. She sounded disappointed but understanding as always. As the office emptied and darkness fell outside, Marcus continued his investigation. The pattern of transfers was complex, but he began to see the structure behind it. Someone with deep access to the company's systems had created a network of shell companies and false vendors. You're watching the Reed building, she said, nodding toward the window where the gleaming towers of the waterfront development were visible in the distance. Marcus looked up, instantly alert. The woman was in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She wore an expensive suit that marked her as someone successful, but there was a hardness around her mouth that spoke of personal pain. Just admiring the architecture, Marcus said carefully, keeping his voice neutral. No, you're not. You're studying it the way someone studies an enemy. She extended her hand. Isabella Martinez, attorney at law. Marcus hesitated, then shook her hand using his cover identity. Michael Ross, security consultant. I know who you really are, Mr. Reed. Marcus's blood ran cold. His hand moved instinctively toward the door, calculating escape routes. Relax, Isabella said quickly. I'm not here to expose you. I'm here because we have a common enemy. I don't know what you're talking about. David Chun and Elena Morrison destroyed you 3 years ago. They framed you for embezzlement and sent you to prison while they stole your company. Isabella's voice was quiet but intense. 2 years before that, they did the same thing to my father. Marcus sat back down slowly. Your father? Antonio Martinez. He owned Martinez Design Associates, a small architecture firm specializing in sustainable building. David and Elena approached him about a merger. My father was excited about the opportunity to expand. He trusted them. Isabella's hands clenched into fists on the table. 6 months later, he was accused of fraud. He lost his business, his reputation, everything. The stress triggered a heart attack. He died before we could prove his innocence. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and meant it. Don't be sorry. Help me prove they're criminals. Help me get justice for my father. How did you find me? Isabella smiled slightly. I'm a good lawyer, and I've been investigating David and Elena for 2 years. I've interviewed everyone they've destroyed, traced their financial patterns, looked for anyone who might want revenge as much as I do. When a security consultant named Michael Ross started asking questions about Reed and Associates' business practices, I got curious. A little more digging revealed that Michael Ross didn't exist before 6 months ago. That doesn't prove I'm Marcus Reed. No, but the way you're watching that building does. You designed it. I saw the original blueprints with your signature. I can see in your eyes that you're looking at something that belongs to you. Marcus studied her carefully. This could be a trap. Another betrayal waiting to happen. But he had learned to read people in prison, and what he saw in Isabella's eyes was genuine pain and anger, emotions that mirrored his own. If I were Marcus Reed, he said slowly, what exactly would you want from me? Partnership. I have legal knowledge and evidence of their pattern of fraud. You have inside knowledge of how they operate and motivation to see them destroyed. Together, we might actually be able to take them down. And if they recognize me? They won't. I barely recognized you myself, and I've been looking at your old photos for months. You've changed too much. Marcus made a decision, trusting his instincts. All right. Let's talk about what you've found. ####, planning together. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus and Isabella met regularly, comparing notes and developing a strategy. Uncovered financial irregularities at 3 firms that David and Elena had acquired. The pattern was identical each time. Approach a struggling firm with an offer to help, gain access to their systems and accounts, then systematically loot the company while framing the original owner for the theft. They're predators, Isabella said during one of their meetings in her small law office. They target people who are vulnerable, who need help, who want to trust someone. Like I was, Marcus said quietly. Like we all were. My father wanted to believe in the partnership. He wanted to think that bigger and more successful architects saw value in his work. Marcus spread financial documents across Isabella's desk. The money trail is complex, but it follows a pattern. They create shell companies, false invoices, and phantom contractors. The money disappears into offshore accounts before anyone realizes it's gone. We need solid proof, Isabella said. Documentation that ties them directly to the theft. Financial records, emails, anything that shows intent and planning. Which means getting inside their system. Exactly. And that's where your security expertise comes in. Marcus had been thinking about this problem constantly. The charity gala next month. It's being held at their headquarters. Security will be lighter than normal because of all the guests. If I can get inside during the event. It's risky. Everything about this is risky. But it might be our best chance. Isabella nodded slowly. Then we'll need to plan carefully. Every detail matters. As they worked together, Marcus found himself noticing things about Isabella that had nothing to do with revenge. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The fierce determination in her eyes when she talked about justice for her father. The moments of vulnerability when the professional mask slipped and he could see the pain beneath. The perfect life. Marcus Reed stood in his corner office on the 20th floor, watching the rain streak down the glass windows as the city of Portland stretched out before him like a promise. At 32 years old, he had everything a man could want. His architecture firm, Reed & Associates, had just won the contract to design the new waterfront development, a project worth $20 million. His name was becoming known, not just in Portland, but across the entire Pacific Northwest. He touched the small velvet box in his pocket, feeling its weight like a secret waiting to be revealed. Tonight, he would propose to Elena at her favorite restaurant. They had been together for 4 years, and she had stood by him through the difficult early days when the firm was just starting. Beautiful, intelligent, and supportive, Elena seemed like the perfect partner for the life he was building. His phone buzzed. A text from David Chun, his business partner and best friend since college. Running late for the meeting. Start without me. Marcus smiled. David was always running late, but he was also brilliant at bringing in clients and managing the financial side of the business while Marcus focused on design. They made a perfect team. Marcus returned to his desk, where blueprints for the waterfront project covered every surface. This project would transform the old industrial docks into a mixed-use development with residential towers, shops, parks, and a public plaza. It was the kind of project that could define a career, the kind of work that could leave a lasting mark on the city he loved. The first crack. The meeting that afternoon was routine until Margaret Foster, their longtime accountant, asked to speak with Marcus privately. Her face was pale, and her hands shook slightly as she closed the conference room door behind them. Marcus, I need to show you something, she said quietly, opening her laptop.